Member of Parliament Dr. Janil Puthucheary told Parliament today that the more politicians play with healthcare, the worse the health of the nation. He was pointing at examples outside Singapore and used it as an analogy to show how healthcare is used by politicians to gain electoral advantage. Dr. Puthucheary's speech drew applause and he was granted extra time to speak. That's rare for an MP who is not a minister.
What would the increasing politicization of healthcare look like? It would start with soundbite politics, like making comments about active aging as a joke about corridor beds when these are not reflective of healthcare outcomes. It may progress to attacking spending on healthcare instead of addressing the success we have had with healthcare outcome. To agree with someone else's policies is not compliant politics. If the policy is good and it achieves its outcomes for a better life for citizens, then attacking it does not generate better politics. If the government has a good policy, then the civil service supporting it is not being compliant. They are serving the best interests of our nation. It's not enough to say that you are supportive of good policies and good governance in general. What you say and how you say it are both important, as are what you choose to say nothing about. When you fail to acknowledge the good, when you avoid discussion of consequences and trade-offs, when you spend a whole speech attacking one point you disagree with and fail to support all the other points you should agree with, when you incite division in the name of diversity, when you silently support xenophobia in the name of nationalism, these are not the markers of good politics, no matter how much debate and diversity of opinion they reflect.
In his speech, Dr. Puthucheary also gave another example of what he called soundbite politics. He was referring to opposition member Gerald Giam's comments on MediShield.
Even a risk-sharing scheme like MediShield, which is supposed to be a form of social health insurance, is run more on commercial than social principles. The MediShield Fund had a capital adequacy ratio of 161% in 2012, which is more than 40% higher than what the MAS expects commercial insurance funds to hold. The loss ratio of MediShield averaged just 63% from 2001 to 2012. This means that it is collecting a lot more in premiums than it is paying out in claims.
Medical insurance premiums are higher than the payouts. Well, there's a very good reason for that. Our population is aging. There are uncertain risks in the future. There are likely to be rising costs. One has to take the holistic approach and understand the whole situation. What would be the risks if we ensured that payouts were the same as premiums? Is that a situation that we want, to ensure that payouts are the same as premiums? Would there be no risks associated with that? Would that be good for the long-term health of our nation and our future?
I never said or suggested that health insurance payouts should be more than the premiums collected. But for a social health insurance scheme, which is what MediShield Life should be, the premiums collected do not need to be so much more. As a point of comparison, the US Affordable Care Act, the new Obamacare, mandates that a minimum loss ratio of between 80 to 85%. Ours is on average 63% over the last 11 years. And it was, I believe, 75% in 2012. So they recommend, the US Affordable Care Act mandates that the minimum loss ratio should be between 80 to 85%, and that insurers who do not spend 80 to 85% of their premiums in healthcare costs must now issue rebates to consumers. And these are all commercial insurers. These are not social health insurance.
We are talking about a public social insurance, and he's comparing it with a private, for-profit environment in the United States. So I don't think the comparison is valid. Secondly, I'm loath to use the United States as the be-all and end-all for a model of where our healthcare system should evolve to. I think even the policymakers and office holders in the United States would readily admit that the short-term electoral outlook significantly constrains their ability to take a long-term strategic vision for the healthcare system of their nation. But lastly, I'd like to just make one point, which is that what if he's wrong? What if Mr. Giam's supposition that we could increase payouts is wrong? And we should compare that to what if the current situation is the wrong decision. If the current situation where, as he puts it, the payouts are far less than the premiums collected, if that's the wrong decision, we save a little bit too much. If he is wrong and we pay out more, if we pay out more and he is wrong, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that our public healthcare financing becomes insolvent and we are unable to support the healthcare needs of a generation, possibly. This has happened in many other countries. The intellectually honest thing to do is to compare risks versus risks, benefits versus benefits, and worst case scenarios against worst case scenarios, not to cherry pick the benefits of your proposal against the potential risks of the proposal in front of you.
I cited the Obamacare precisely because of the US health system and the trouble that it is in today, and the fact that it is a commercial insurance scheme rather than a social insurance scheme. In fact, a social insurance scheme should have a much higher loss ratio than a commercial insurance scheme, because commercial insurance want to make money, whereas the government is not in the business of making money. In fact, MediShield is supposed to be a not-for-profit insurance scheme. Secondly, he asked about the grave scenario of if the payouts become more than the premiums collected. Now, in the case of medical insurance, it is relatively easy to be able to project what are the likely payouts to be. And compared to, let's say, earthquake insurance, or something that has a much lower frequency compared to health insurance, where you are able to see the trend in the cost of medical expenses over the years and be able to project what the payouts should be. So the question is it comes to the point where, because of the miscalculations, we aim for a 90% or 80% medical loss ratio, but for some reason there's SARS that year or something like that happens, then we have a situation where the government would have to step in to subsidize a bit more of the cost, and the premiums can rise behind the increase in costs, not before you know that the costs are going to increase, then you raise the premiums.
Because we're talking about a social public good, it is therefore incumbent that we take a longer-term, prudent approach past one electoral cycle. I'm glad Mr. Giam feels that medical expenditure is predictable. I and my professional colleagues would completely disagree. There's a lot of uncertainty about how costs will rise. Myself and my brothers and sisters in the healthcare profession are part of that problem, because we keep researching and coming up with all kinds of ways to spend the health minister's money. Lastly, the example of SARS is a great example. It is precisely because of the prudent, conservative, risk-averse approach that we take on a day-to-day basis that when something like SARS comes along, the government is able to step in and do what needs to be done.